All right, hello everyone. All the panelists are present. It's 6 o'clock right now. I know that there's more people that are registered, so let's give everyone just a minute and panelists time to gather your notes or get into a ready position. We'll be starting shortly. Thank you. Okay. I'm sure there's more people that will join us as we go. But right now, it's just access to the panelist here. So good evening. My name is Jesse Herrera, and I serve as the Director of Inclusion for South Dakota Mines. I've served the South Dakota Mines campus for the past 9 years, and I've been asked to facilitate the discussion tonight. The session is being recorded, which some of you maybe agreed to earlier. We're here to discuss freedom of expression and respect in college athletics. As I'm sure you're all aware, some student athletes at South Dakota Mines have been exercising their First Amendment right during the national anthem. Some view this expression as a peaceful protest, while others it's just disrespectful. We understand and acknowledge that there is concern among the greater Hard Rocker community as well. Due to that, the purpose of tonight's discussion is to hear various perspectives on this topic, as well as to have an open, engaging dialogue. The session will last 90 minutes. We have gathered a number of questions from you, the audience, and assorted them by themes. I want to make it clear that as tonight's facilitator, my role is to remain neutral. The questions that will be asked were derived from themes that arose from those that were submitted. Toward the end of the session, we'll open up the floor for any additional questions. You will see that at the bottom of your screen, the Q&A little tile there. So to the panel, this is not a debate, but a dialogue. So you're encouraged to ask questions and discuss with each other. This may lead to challenging questions, so feel free to take a moment to gather your thoughts before answering. As facilitator, I will step in if necessary, but I sincerely believe that we can have a civil conversation no matter how enthusiastic we get. So as any facilitator would do, there are ground rules that need to be set first. So the first one being respectfully challenge one another by asking questions, but refrain from personal attacks. So in other words, focus on ideas, criticize ideas, not individuals. Using I statements shows you are responding from your own experience and not using generalizations. Questions and answers should be directed at generating greater understanding of perspectives. So in other words, comment in order to share information, not to persuade. Please keep in mind that the goal is not to agree, but to gain a deeper understanding of the other perspectives. And again, I just mentioned this, but another reminder that the session is being recorded. Okay, so now it's time for our panel members to introduce themselves. Due to the Zoom environment, I'll call out your name and you'll have the opportunity to say your name, where you're from, as well as your affiliation with South Dakota Mines. I know time is gonna go by really fast, so if you can keep your introductions to maybe 3 to 5 minutes, that would be helpful for everyone. So starting off, we'll start with President Rankin. You can go ahead and start.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Jim Rankin, president here at South Dakota Mines and an electrical engineering graduate from 1978.
Thank you, Dr. Rankin. Gordy?
Yeah, hey everybody, good evening. Greetings from Houston, Texas. I'm Gordy Bannister, metallurgical engineering, 1980, graduate of mines, originally from Casper, Wyoming. I was one of those people who never spent a day working metallurgy in my career. I joined Shell in 1980 and spent my whole career, 35 years in Shell, sort of in the oil and gas business. My last gig was 8 years running one of the biggest oil companies in California called Aera Energy, and I retired back in 2015. Since then, I've started doing public and private company board work. I'm associated with a few household names I'm sure people in South Dakota know. Dow, I'm on the board of Dow, and I'm also on the board of Tyson Foods. And so a couple of, I guess, little sort of tidbits in my background. I think, so far as I can tell, I'm the first African-American graduate of South Dakota School of Mines. And so, you know, that's one distinction. Another thing, I do have the sort of protests in my history. Having grown up in Casper, my father was the president of the NAACP there. And so we were there back in 1969 when Wyoming had its Black 14 incident. For those of you who don't know, that's when 14 black football players wanted to wear an armband in protest of BYU. And anyway, my father was in support of those players. And at that time, I guess it was about 10 or 11, I remember getting lots of hate mail and nasty phone calls and all sorts of stuff at home as a child. So I do have a little bit of protest history sort of in my life. I also have a lot of veterans in my family too. And as I close here, I want to just extend my gratitude to everybody who served in the military, who are on both this panel and on this call. I have a lot of respect for all of you. So thanks very much for your service.
Thank you, Gordy. Representative Johnson?
Well, I think I have to press the unmute button. Is that correct? Is it working then?
We got you. We can hear you.
President Rankin, I have never heard you be so brief in your introduction. Never. Just want to point that out. So I moved to Rapid City when I was 5 years old. That's well over half a century ago. I graduated from Central High School here as a cobbler in 1979. And then from the School of Mines with the software engineering and computer science degree in 1983. I waited about 20 years and then went on to the University of South Dakota and received an MBA in 2003. I served as an officer in the United States Air Force in active and reserve duty from 1986 until 1994. I was elected to the South Dakota House of Representatives in 2017. I've served 2 terms, and then just about a week and a half ago or so, I was elected to the South Dakota State Senate. I sit on the Senate Appropriations Committee, and I am the chair of the South Dakota Senate Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. So I thank you for allowing me to sit in this group, and all ears. I've got a lot of things to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Colonel Hall, you're next.
Hi, let's see, I'm a recent alumni of the South Dakota School of Mines, having gotten a master's in mining engineering and management in 2018. I'm also currently enrolled in their doctoral program in mining engineering and management. I'm a 30-year active duty veteran of the Army. Was born in Detroit, 1959. So I'm close in age to you, Senator-elect, I guess we'd call you. In Detroit, Michigan. I grew up there. Went to the University of Michigan when Bo Schembechler was the coach. I'd like to say now that no one President Rankin could confuse Michigan with the Hard Rockers, because your team plays better than Michigan does now. Got commissioned in 1981. Spent a year in the reserves while I went to Iowa State University and got a master's degree. Then spent the next 30 years on active duty. Along the way, I accumulated a PhD in nuclear engineering from the University of Maryland. Then I retired, rolled into government service, got another master's degree in history. So I'm an engineer with a degree in history. And then I'm using my GI Bill to go to South Dakota School of Mines. So went to 2 wars, Desert Storm, and spent 15 wonderful months in Iraq. And so I too have some views to share. That's about all I think I have to say right now.
Thank you, Colonel Hall. Marcy, can I call you next, please?
Sure. It appears I'm the liberal arts representative on this panel. I have the School of Mines in my blood, however, as I was born the year my dad graduated from the School of Mines in 1957. First sweatshirt I ever owned was a Mines sweatshirt, and I was taught as a child to sing the fight song, although I had to say heck of an engineer. I actually attended the School of Mines from 1975 to 1977, but at the same time, I was working full-time in local media, and after 2 years of doing that, and it almost killed me, I decided to pursue a media career, primarily as an on-air person and a journalist, but I retired after 15 years as an executive running the broadcast division of a small family-held private media company that was based in South Bend, Indiana. Went to a couple Notre Dame, Michigan football games. I am currently on the Hard Rock Club board. My dad was one of the founders of the Hard Rock Club, knowing how important, in fact, vital that athletic scholarship was to his ability to get an engineering degree. My sister preceded me on the board, who was a mining engineer grad from the School of Mines. So we have long generational loyalty to the institution, to the football program, and to the school in general.
Thank you, Marcy. Okay, Jack, I have you next.
Hi, my name is Jack Batho. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I came to Mines wanting to play football, be a track athlete, as well as pursue a mechanical engineering degree. We recently added a biomedical engineering program to our list of degrees, and I've transitioned to that program as well, with the intent of potentially one day being not only a double, but a triple, I guess, major with pre-health, biomed, and mechanical. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska originally, and I've known about Mines a long time. My aunt and uncle both are graduates from Mines, which really played a deciding role in choosing to come to Mines. I would like to say thank you to both our alumni and our military veterans, as you guys have given us the chance, me particularly to do what I want to do with football come year, as well as be on the track team and pursue the degree that I want to get, so I can, use what I was given by you guys in turn to help people who may be less fortunate.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate that. Last but not least, Dom.
Hey, so my name's Dominic Jackson. I'm originally from Aurora, Colorado. Been a little bit around everywhere in Colorado, but I went to Aurora Central High School, was recruited from there to join South Dakota School of Mines football team, in 2016. That's when I arrived. And since then, I've been majoring in electrical engineering. I just want to say thank you guys for your services. It really means a lot to me, really means a lot to my family as well.
Great, thank you for all the introductions. Let's just jump right in. Time's gonna go fast, so I really want to start with the athletes first. And I think something that's been on everyone's mind is, just thinking about freedom of expression and just how that should be expressed. So really starting with both you, Jack and Dom, of what does freedom of expression mean to you personally?
For me, it means a lot. You know, obviously living in a country like America where we have the opportunity to express what we personally believe in, given what was sacrificed by other people, veterans especially, it means a lot to me because it gives the opportunities like we have today where, you know, we may not all agree on the topic at hand, but we have the ability to have the conversation and get insight from backgrounds that we may never have, you know, viewed or had an understanding of before.
I would say for me, you know, it's being able to, you know, voice our opinions. You know, the biggest thing, you know, with, you know, all the wrong and injustices in our country, you know, we want to be able to have our voice heard, you know, be able to have these tough conversations, you know, dealing with police brutality, racism, systematic injustices, you know, we want to be a voice that many people don't have. And that's why we're using this platform, especially because, you know, there's a lot of people that feel their voice isn't heard. And so that's what we're trying to do. You know, we're trying to create unity in the country that we live in.
And staying with the athletes here, and I'm not sure, I'm not aware of who's exercising their freedom of expression or not, and in what ways they're doing that. So this goes to both of you and I believe you're both co-captains, correct? So
Yes, sir.
So being co-captains there, how do you feel about your teammates and their decision to express in whatever way they do that?
You know, I will say when we talked to our coach about this, you know, we had a senior meeting, you know, captain's meeting, and we wanted everybody to express their own opinions, their own voices in their own way. At the end of the day, we all understand, you know, we're still a family, you know, we're still playing for the same thing. We're still fighting for one another, you know, but even if guys don't kneel, you know, and in some cases it's seen wrong by many, you know, they support the reasoning behind it and why we're doing it.
Yeah, like Dom said, we've had a lot of conversations about what we can do to kind of bring awareness to the topic at hand, as well as what we want to do moving forward. Personally, I have my brother's back, you know, being part of the football team for more than 5 years at this point, being a super senior. You get to know a lot of these guys personally and a lot about where they come from and who they are. And I wouldn't trade that for the world, the opportunity that I've had to come here and meet all these people that I'll have lifelong relationships with. When you play on a football team, it's more than just a team. You become a family. And I'm sure anybody in this meeting tonight can say that they'll have their families back no matter what. And while I may be the one that's going to stand with my hand over my heart, I do stand next to my brothers and I will support who they are and what they believe in.
Let me kind of get into that a little bit more. What you said, Jack, there is you've talked about how you've been communicating with your fellow teammates about maybe different racial and social injustices. Can either of you expand on those conversations and how they've gone, and maybe talk a little bit about what you've learned from each other?
So something that Coach Flores has done since he's come here is he took all of our senior leaders when he first got here, and we've had, you know, we try to do weekly meetings, but it kind of, with COVID, it was, you know, bi-weekly, maybe even just once monthly. But we've read books about how do you find your why. And, you know, now we're on the topic of, you know, social injustice, just because it's a big thing in the country currently. So we've had meetings where we've gone over clips of videos to try to bring in some information and insight to people like me who have never experienced these social injustices, and kind of give us a better idea and kind of a background on what they're feeling and what it is that I may not see and how I can be a bigger part of the solution, rather than just having my opinion without having any understanding of the other side. I think our coach has done a good job with giving a lot of the athletes in our program a platform to, you know, gather their ideas and, I guess, produce an opinion so that we can understand their situations. Without these conversations, I wouldn't know what's going on through their eyes, what they see. We had a conversation after practice last weekend where a gentleman, I can't remember the name of him, but he said he knew Kevin Thompson, one of our ex-football players and alums, who said that he's noticed him just moving along on the sidewalk in a different direction to allow someone to walk past because that's what he felt made them comfortable just because he was Black. And I've never understood or witnessed or even, I can't remotely understand what that's like. So these past couple months with all this information, it's been nice to get a better picture of what truly goes on and why people are having the opinions that they have.
And kind of also build off of that too, we understand like the best way for each of us to really understand each other is to have conversations, even through football, we try to step out and be able to have these conversations with other people on campus, other people who are curious, because we can't come to a common understanding or understand where one another's coming at when you don't understand or haven't been in their shoes, A lot of us guys, the Black student athletes, have experienced, a lot of this injustice firsthand, to key out some, Mike watched his older brother when he was younger get beat by the police. My dad, who served for 32 years in the military and is still continuing to, a guy who served for this country, if you can ask anybody that's met him, a real nice and kind gentleman, was harassed by police a few times and numerous times, and it's just being able to kind of, allow people to know what we've gone through and experience, and not only that, for us to kind of understand where other people are coming to, because the only way we can grow is to step outside that box and learn from one another.
Great, thank you both. Well, obviously, athletes exercising their freedom of expression in this way has caused a great deal of concern among the greater Hard Rock community. So this goes out to the rest of you, the rest of the panel, of do you view this as a freedom of expression issue? Why or why not? And I will not call on you. You can just, when you're ready to answer, you can go ahead and pop in.
I think it's absolutely a freedom of expression issue. The First Amendment of the Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of press or the freedom of speech. My wife says I have to look at the camera, so excuse me, that's why I had to get up earlier. So you don't have to protect speech that doesn't make you uncomfortable, because nobody cares. So kneeling makes people uncomfortable. That's the intent of it. I mean, I've had colonels of the military police who are people of color who have told me, all the things to do if you get stopped by the police. Hands on the steering wheel, dome light on, look straight ahead, say yes or no, sir. Because that's been their experience. So, and again, growing up in Detroit, I've had, predominantly minority city now. It was about equal when I was growing up. I lived through the riots in '67. Saw tanks driving down the street four houses from my house. So I've seen some things, but again, you don't have to protect speech that doesn't make people uncomfortable. And that's why the Supreme Court has said things like, flag burning is protected speech because it's political speech and it makes people uncomfortable. That's why things like kneeling during the playing of the national anthem makes people uncomfortable. And I say this as somebody who took an oath to protect the Constitution and served for 30 years in uniform, has spent another 9 years under essentially the same oath, working for the federal government as a civilian. So, I've lived it. I've studied at the Army War College. I studied as a historian. And so I'm rambling a bit now, but that's kind of, I think, my position.
Thanks, Colonel Hall. Anybody else? Feel free to jump in here. And also let me remind the panelists that you can ask questions of each other as well as we go on.
Yeah, Jesse. So I think I'd add that I see it as freedom of expression as well. And one of the things I didn't mention up front is I was on the basketball team at Mines, and so I know what it's like to be a Black athlete in Western South Dakota and travel to all those other towns in South Dakota, Nebraska, North Dakota, everything else, and kind of be the only Black athlete. Now we got multiple Black athletes on the teams now, but I know what it was like to be kind of the only one. And I think it is a matter of a freedom of expression, but I have to declare that I don't know if I don't know that if I was called upon to do something like this, like kneel during the national anthem, I don't know how I would propose we progress the dialogue into action. Because I would be expressing my frustration, but I don't know how I would propose that we move the dialogue into action. So I do believe it is about freedom of expression. I do understand and realize that it makes a lot of people angry, but I don't know what I would do to kind of move the community on to action. So I'll give you an example, because I've had conversations with some of my fellow basketball players from when I was back in school. And, those guys were, and I think, Jack, you talked about how you understand now better what people are going through. Those guys had no idea what I was going through. They literally, it wasn't until I'd had a conversation a few months ago that they had any idea what I went through. And so I really want to applaud you guys for getting to know what people are going through so that we can work together to move forward to deal with the systemic racism that I believe not only used to exist, but continues to exist, because I experienced that today. And by the way, I'm a former CEO, I'm a board member, and I still get stuff today.
Yeah, I guess I would build on that a bit, Gordy. I do think it is a free speech issue, and I think it is a protected free speech issue. And I believe free speech is important, and have spent a career defending the First Amendment, which often has to be done on sometimes pretty salty grounds. It's hard to defend free speech when on the other side of the table is a pornographer, as an example. But free speech is protected in this country, and it's a vital issue. Having said that, I will tell you, I react very viscerally to people kneeling at the national anthem, because my experience is the first 10 years of my dad's career, he spent his life as the chief engineer at Veterans Administration hospitals. And it didn't matter where we were. If the national anthem played, cars stopped, you got out, you stood, and you watched veterans struggling sometimes out of their wheelchairs to stand. Then I had to do more research for myself as to the why. And I read about Eric Reed and Colin Kaepernick choosing to kneel because it was reverent, not disrespectful. It was a position of prayer. And that kind of opened my eyes a bit. But I would build on what Gordy said, that what worries me about the whole movement is that it doesn't create dialogue. It is a monologue. It is a gesture where the sender has an intent of the message, but no ability to span that gap to the receiver. So somebody like me who reacts at a gut level to seeing somebody kneel at the national anthem, I immediately fill that space with what I believe the intent is. And that's what I think is happening, that it's very difficult to create that span then to this kind of conversation. And by the way, I really applaud the university for doing this. And I hope there are people who are listening who've already made up their mind, who reacted viscerally like I do, because I think then it shows we all can educate ourselves a bit. And just raise our hand, as Dom and I've communicated over social media, as he responded very eloquently to what I thought was some hateful, immature speech by people who should know better. But and he responded in an elegant, kind way and volunteered for the dialogue. But I don't know how we do that en masse.
Well, I think maybe it's time that I speak up and say something here a little bit. I have a rhetorical question here that I'd like to ask, and I'd like the students who are kneeling during my national anthem, the salute to my country. Why? I'd like to ask them, how is it specifically, with detail?
I would add it's their country too.
Go ahead, Representative Johnson. Colonel,
Oh, I agree that we're all in the same country, Mr. Hall, but I'm wondering if perhaps this isn't, it's just my national anthem when it comes to the students in this case. And I didn't interrupt you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall, I didn't interrupt you.
Sorry,
I disagree,
gentlemen.
Mr. Johnson, but go ahead.
Gentlemen, go ahead. Representative Johnson, you have the floor.
My question is specifically, and not in generality, specifically, how is it that showing disrespect to the flag, showing disrespect to the United States of America, and showing disrespect to the fallen men and women in military uniform is improving or helping your cause? If you wish to address the issues of racism and inequality in the United States or on campus, why don't you address that issue? The fact that you make people uncomfortable is not creating allies to your cause. What's happening is that it's counterproductive. You're not gaining allies here. The subject of this discussion tonight is reading now, freedom of expression and respect in college athletics. I think every one of us here agrees that freedom of expression is critical in the United States of America, as is respect for everybody in college athletics. But I think you're manipulating a situation that causes adversity to your cause, where I would suppose and hope that create a sign or create an ally, a group of allies that can help you with these situations. If you feel like you're being wronged in society, then incorporate allies, don't incorporate adversity. That would be my recommendation. Then we can all talk about this. I think that perhaps this session tonight should be renamed the discussion on whether kneeling at the national anthem is appropriate gesturing towards inequality in our society. Because freedom of expression and respect in college athletics, nobody's going to argue with that. But manipulation of the national anthem and the flag of the United States of America, granted, it's your right, but it's also to your detriment, I believe.
So Mr. Johnson, how would you suggest, other than making a sign, that they get attention to their cause in a state that is vastly underrepresented by minorities?
Can I say something real quick, please?
Oh, certainly.
To respond to what you had to say, Johnson. So we understand, taking a knee is very controversial. Like I said, my father's in the military, and a lot of the other student athletes here that take a knee as well, they've had family members who have served or are currently serving. We understand that, we will get hate from what we're doing, and we understand how people view it. The thing we want people to understand is the reason why we're kneeling. We're kneeling because of police brutality. We're kneeling because of racism, systematic oppression. We're not kneeling because we're saying that we're showing disrespect to the men and women who have served for this country. Military's been in my family since I've been born. My dad's been in 32 years, and I plan, once I'm done and I graduate from the school, I plan on also joining the military as well. We understand that a lot of people aren't going to accept what we want to do, but we also, to talk to kind of the step moving forward, we want to have open forums, where we can bring people in and basically have these conversations, that most people don't want to have. And, one thing I've learned, too, is like, there's been a lot of different areas where people have tried to make a difference. There's been the protests, people trying to, talk to courts, but, it's really ignored, even in social media. We've talked to multiple people about this, and they ignore, what's going on in social media. They drive past, the protests that are going on and act like they're not there. What we're just trying to use our platform, to basically get our message out there. And I know our message hasn't gotten out there properly, and that is partially on us, but we're not in no way trying to show any disrespect to the flag and the people who have served.
Mr.
So
Herrera.
I think the question I'd like to ask Representative Johnson is that, do you accept that your view of them kneeling is disrespectful is just your opinion, that other people can hold a different opinion than you in that regard?
Well, Mr. Bannister, I'll be happy to answer that question. Certainly it is my opinion. Certainly. And it's also the opinion of easily 80 to 90% of the people who watch and witness people kneeling at the flag. That is in most people's opinion, that it's a direct assault on the fallen men and women in the United States military. The men and women who walk around with the Purple Heart, the men and women who have been injured but not deceased because of this. I think what we've heard here tonight is that the purpose of this kneeling act is to offend, because by offending, you're going to get attention. It's offensive to me that somebody would assume that because their family members have served in the military honorably, that gives credence to somebody to stand up and disrespect the American flag. If the goal here is to generate respect, you can smile if you'd like, but it's serious. I consider it very serious. I don't consider this a random matter of discussion. You are, in my opinion, okay, I'll clarify it that way, Mr. Bannister. In my opinion, you are disrespecting the men and women who have given you this right, and you're using an element or a figure, a flag of my country to further your cause. What's wrong with placards? What's wrong with marches in the street? What's wrong with telephone calls? What's wrong with talking to me and veterans, for that matter, about addressing the issues of racism in our community? If that's your goal, then why not do that? It appears to me that your goal is to desecrate the flag and to desecrate the memory of the fallen men and women in the United States military. And that's how it's read.
Well, I guess I would respectfully disagree, given that it appears as though the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the National Hockey League, the SEC, the ACC, and please don't make me list everybody, has moved past the notion that this is a matter of disrespecting the flag and disrespecting the military, and rather have significantly changed the dialogue and the conversation about what was originally happening. And oh, by the way, I guess I'd like to mention that the commentary about fallen colleagues and all of that business didn't matter when Black soldiers came back to America after having served in the military. So when my father served in the Korean War and he came back to segregated America, nobody came, nobody worried about that. Nobody said this is disrespectful, right? So I guess I just want to point out that I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that the kids are doing this to somehow stir people up because they want to be disrespectful to how somebody believes. I accept your point of view and I accept the way you believe, but I'll just tell you, I fundamentally and just respectfully disagree. And the good news is that we're here having a conversation about what to do about it. So we can continue kind of going back and forth and saying, oh, well, kneeling is wrong or kneeling is bad. we'll get to the policy point here in a minute. But at the end of the day, what we really need to talk about is how do we help these kids feel welcome in Rapid City at South Dakota School of Mines and across the state of South Dakota? Because I can tell you, as a Black athlete in South Dakota, I didn't feel welcome. And I can give you chapter and verse, all the crap that I had to put up with. And I graduated in 4 years with all that stuff, and I didn't feel welcome. And so ultimately, what we really have to do is get our heads around how to make them feel welcome and not continue to hit them over the head and say, well, you know, you're disrespecting me, so I don't want to talk to you. I'm not suggesting that that's you, Representative Johnson, but all I'm suggesting is we're going to have to move to a point where we have a conversation about what to do to ensure that these kids feel welcome, what to do to make sure that if they get stopped by the police, nobody has to worry about getting shot, right? That's what we have to worry about, and that's what we need to work on, because that's why they're making the choice to kneel.
I'd like to point out too that, you know, in this, we're fortunate enough to have Representative Johnson on this panel here, but there are a number of other people that, you know, we heard Representative Johnson's voice tonight, but there are a number of other people that have that same viewpoint, you know, so don't want, you know, Representative Johnson to feel like he's the one holding up this platform here, because you know, we're fortunate enough to have him here to voice his perspective, and we do have a number of other people that would agree with that, and really just thinking about what do we do about this? And actually that moves us to the next theme of policy. And a number of the questions we received were really just around the idea of basically, is this even allowed? And so we're fortunate enough to have President Rankin with us here. And so President Rankin, I guess I'll turn it over to you and just ask you, are there policies at the university or at the state level that address freedom of expression?
That's a good question. And we did get a lot of that, a lot of inquiries about that. What could we do? You know, why does the university allow this? Why don't we make the athletes stand up for the national anthem? And, you know, it's a tough question. I think we've been remiss. We should have been communicating a little bit sooner instead of waiting for this town hall. We should have put out a little bit more on our position. And, you know, from a university perspective, we believe that we really endorse freedom of speech. We think that our students and faculty and staff have that right to do that. But last year, and we took it from a different perspective a year or so ago. What we had was there were free speech zones on campus. So if you wanted to protest, there were like 3 zones you would go to. There were certain hours of the day you could be there. And working with state legislature and the Board of Regents, actually nationwide, there's a group called FIRE that did a lot of work on freedom of speech and making sure you had good policies out there. And one of the bills that came through last year was House Bill 1087 that really had us revise our policy. So all the universities in the state revised our public policy. So now our policy is that a student can protest or have their voice heard at any place on campus at any time. Now, you're not allowed to disrupt the educational process. You can't stop people from going into the classroom, but you have that right to make sure your voice has been heard. And so our policy is much stronger now that we really don't have the right to stop that student from making that, whether we agree with that or not, or whether it makes us angry or not. There's a few messages I've heard over the last year that I just as soon not heard, but our policy says we give students, faculty, and staff the right to make that, to express that message. One thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that part of that bill requires that every year, in fact, last week we sent it in, we have to send a list of every speaker we have on campus to the governor's office and to the state legislature. And we also have to give a list of every time we might have hindered somebody's freedom of speech. We like to make sure that second list is at 0, but that's something we have to report every year of what we're trying to do. So yeah, this was one way of freedom of speech. From our perspective of how we read that policy, we really didn't have a chance to say, no, you can't kneel going forward. Related to that, we've had a lot of questions about, well, why don't you just keep the athletes in the locker room? You know, if you don't bring them on the field, then they can't kneel. Well, we belong to the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference, and the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference policy is that all students or all players have to be on the field when we do the national anthem. So to keep the students in the locker room, we would have had to break conference policy as well. So, you know, there's some constraints in there. What I'd really like to see is, I think the students have stayed within policy. I don't see that there's a violation. But the bigger question now is, how do we take that conversation and move it to the next step? I think that they've used the policy to identify a problem. They've definitely got a conversation going. You know, we're all here, or we wouldn't be here tonight listening to this town hall. Where do we go from here?
I guess certainly we have a conversation going, but I think this conversation could have been brought up by the students multiple ways without disrespecting the United States of America, which is what their actions are. I didn't get an answer regarding specifically what it is that by kneeling, specifically, how has that helped your cause? I haven't heard anything. Another question that I would have was, of those students that knelt, Mr. Jackson, are you a senior this year? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And have you been on the football team for multiple years?
Yes, sir.
So is this the first year that you chose to kneel during the national anthem?
Yes, sir. But at the
Okay,
same
so
time,
I
it was
guess
the only.
So what I understand then is that because of a prima donna in the NFL, now suddenly we have some request for limelight. That's what it appears to me. If this was proper action prior, why didn't it happen 3 or 4 years ago?
Well, because the coach wouldn't allow us to. You know, we have Coach Floor now, and you know he wants us to be able to have, you know, our voice being heard. So that's the real reason why you're seeing it this first time this year.
The South Dakota State Legislature heard legislation 2 years ago about students' rights to free speech. I voted in favor of that. Who wouldn't? I'm a strong advocate of freedom of expression on campus. We had that when I was going to School of Mines, but we didn't do it by your method, your chosen method. And I just don't understand why the choice of expression would be something that is just to create offense. A football team that is offensive only is not, I mean, if you have a good offense, but you're not making any scores, it's not a very good football team. If we're not creating any discussion specifically about freedom of expression and your rights as college athletes, then why are we doing this? I would ask that no, I won't ask anything. Mr. Bannister, I can't speak to your experience in the past, certainly. And I have nothing but respect for you and for what you've done and for everything that you've discussed about your history. When I talk about fallen heroes, fallen men and women in military uniform, I didn't specify Black, white, Hispanic, or any other ethnicity. I spoke of men and women in uniform.
Well, Mr. Johnson, let me say, you know, in my 30 years, I've worked alongside people who were later killed in action. I've worked alongside people who were wounded. I've worked along soldiers who have later killed themselves, regrettably. I had my driver probably killed herself. Her family won't say. My driver from Iraq a couple of months ago. So I understand what you're saying about, you know, respecting the dead. I've again, in 30 years, this has affected me personally, but I don't see how you can equate, you know, again, sworn to support and defend the Constitution. And I read your website and I read about your position on enforcing the Constitution, going back to protected free speech, speech that is not offensive doesn't need to be protected. So we're here today because their speech offended people. Now, granted, it offended a lot of people, but they've gotten people's attention. So the question is, as you've said, now, how do we as a university community move this dialogue forward? Because they got what they were looking for. And I can tell you, as a historian, yeah, I'm an engineer with a degree in history, I'm dangerous. The Jim Crow army of the 1940s and 50s that then desegregated in Korea only because, even though they've been ordered to desegregate in the 1940s, desegregated only because they didn't have enough white replacements to put in combat units, was forced to desegregate, and then sent soldiers back who even in the 1960s were discriminated against when they went off post. So,
Mr. Hall,
yeah. Yes, Mr. Johnson?
don't you believe in the bottom of your heart, don't you believe that we should be talking about those issues instead of kneeling and disrespecting the flag of the United States of America? Aren't these issues that we can discuss? Aren't these issues, why are we using
We're
a
discussing it
scapegoat
now.
in the American flag to make a discussion on these issues? I'd belly up to the discussion at a heartbeat if they'd contact me and say, we're organizing a parade. We've got people we need help with placards. We need to march the streets. We need to ring a bell in town center. But
Respectfully,
instead, what we're doing is spitting on the grave of the American soldiers, black, white, and every other ethnicity that fought for our freedoms and for our right.
and again, having spent about 6 times as much time in uniform as you did, probably more if you weren't a drilling IMA.
Thank you for
I
that.
disagree. I disagree. It is not spitting on their graves.
Well, why
Because
don't we
this is what they
discuss,
fought for.
Gentlemen,
Why
may
don't
I,
we-
may I be able to jump in real quick?
No, I think Jack, student Jack has been having his mute and mic.
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
I would just like to bring up a couple points. I understand that there's a lot of, I guess, anger towards the kneeling. I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for some of the people on our team that the decision to make that choice to kneel isn't to bring attention to themselves, nor is it to disrespect the flag. That is never the intention, never was the intention. Let me speak without giving those reactions, sir. I've given my time, given you your time to talk. Back on the topic, these students are kneeling to try to bring attention to things that they deem necessary to be talked about. We're currently here having this conversation because of the action, but that action was never meant to disrespect anybody. When someone goes down on the football field, what does every other player do when they're hurt? Any of you, I'm asking as an open question.
Neil.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Sorry. And not only do we kneel under God, do we kneel for fallen soldiers? Do we kneel for fallen brothers on the football field? It wasn't a sign of disrespect when it started. Colin Kaepernick has come out and said, I know he's not someone that a lot of people agree with, but he went out to these veterans to get this opinion about what he could do without disrespecting the flag, but also bring attention to certain issues at hand. So given the idea that we kneel under God for fallen soldiers and for fallen men on the field, I don't believe that anybody on our team, and specifically, I can't speak for other teams or other members outside of this organization, but I do not believe they are disrespecting fallen soldiers. I do not believe they're disrespecting the flag. I only believe they're trying to bring awareness to an issue that has tried to be brought in awareness to via different methods that hasn't gotten the reaction that this is. It's not it's not a decision to get a reaction to make you hate somebody or to make you angry at somebody, but we're here having this conversation because of what's happened.
Thank you, Jack. And actually a common theme that we've had within these conversations here, and what a very good point that Representative Johnson has brought up is, well, what now? you know, we've talked about this, and I think Marcy, you mentioned this before as well, is what now? You obviously, we're here, we're having this discussion. So that's the another question back on you as students of, you know, what do we do now? I mean, can you describe tangible ways that you're planning to continue this conversation, or, you know, what kind of change would you like to see on campus or the city or the state or the nation? And that's a loaded question, but what some of the comments we've received through this this forum was, when will it be okay to stand up again?
So a big thing for us, we were trying to do as an institution and as a community, you know, before COVID ended up ending our season early and not being able to do it because of COVID, was we were trying to get a big American flag onto our field, with first responders in the community, being that of Monument Health, of ambulance companies, firemen, police officers, veterans, people who serve at Ellsworth Air Force Base, to all come down and hold that flag together. That was the idea we had as an institution and as a football program, to show our unity. We're not here to disrespect, nor the gentlemen who have kneeled during these games to disrespect anybody. It's about bringing awareness to this issue. And now that we have brought awareness to this issue, personally, there's a couple of things I'd like to see. My big thing is, now that we have the attention, what is our response? What are we going to do next? And I'd like to see us, you know, go out into the community and give to these people who may not have, you know, the protections or things that we have as far as resources. You know, someone like me, I don't understand or realize how privileged I am to be in a position I am, to even be able to talk to, you know, Representative Johnson, you know, Mr. Hall, as well as Mr. Bannister, and to you, Marcia. I'm blessed to be able to meet you guys and have this conversation with you. But I think it's important that we now turn this forward to bettering our community, whether it's, you know, donating in a food bank, giving time in the Hope Center, finding backpacks, clothes, anything that we can give to people who don't have the resources. I personally think it'd be cool if we could start a fundraiser to give cleats, gloves, helmets, equipment to those people in the community that don't have those resources, so they may be able to be the next generation of people that can come through sports and have that opportunity. I've been blessed to grow up in a community that was outgoing and have parents who never had to struggle for monetary issues. And there are people on this program and in this community who don't have that. On top of that, I'd like to see if we can, you know, go out for Habitat for Humanity and build houses, or go out and read books to children in the community, and try to just, you know, spread the message that we have to try to bring unity rather than divide.
What I'd also like to add to that, you know, we kind of also talked about it as a senior group as well, you know, was doing like a big sister, big brother club, you know, with the student athletics, you know, bringing kids in that aren't as privileged, you know, kind of taking them under our wing and being able to like show them, you know, what we've gone through, you know, be able to learn about what they're going through, what we've gone through, and, you know, be able to help them throughout their lives, you know. And going back on the fundraiser that Jack was also talking about, yesterday we had an open forum. And the biggest thing we want to be able to do, you know, on our spare time is be able to have these open conversations, like I said before, you know, be able to have people who agree or disagree with us, you know, to come in and to voice their opinion, just like how we're doing now. You know, we want to be able to have these conversations, be able to grow, and be able to find better ways to unite. You know, no, we don't plan on trying to take a knee, you know, throughout the years. You know, we're just trying to get that message across, just like Batho said. I met with a gentleman named Tim John, and he was a former alumni here, and he's currently working for the police department here in Rapid City. You know, he came out to our open forum yesterday, and me and him had a quick conversation, and he wanted to be able to do some type of partnership, you know. And I was also thinking about this from last night to today, you know, probably doing a partnership with, you know, the police force, and, you know, doing fundraising, not just for equipment, but, you know, for essential needs for kids who need it, for families who need it as well. You know, to be able to show people that there are people out there that care, you know, that want to make sure that they're going to be all right. You know, just being able to expand that to other companies that are willing to, you know, partner with us, you know, and move forward.
I think.
Oh, one other thing too, I thought would be kind of cool. I actually had a friend who does tutoring for younger kids through Zoom. You know, I know like student athletes maybe not necessarily be able to, you know, participate in all that all the time, but, you know, being able to open that up to some of the kids in the university, you know, being able to kind of tutor younger kids in elementary, middle school, you know, through Zoom. You know, I thought that was a pretty cool idea as well.
So just as a suggestion and a statement too, I'm not sure a lot of people are aware and that the Rapid City Police Department is the only police department in the state of South Dakota that's accredited. And what that means is, like any accrediting institution, they have to meet standards of excellence for which they are graded and held accountable every year. And that includes how they handle incidents of force. They have been accredited since 1990 and have done some groundbreaking work, particularly in the areas of race, ethnicity, de-escalation of force. And I don't think a lot of people know that. And so in this community specifically, when people hear conversation about police violence and systemic racism, it's like they don't get credit for what they've done. That doesn't minimize the problem. The problem exists and we've seen it in the headlines. But the fact is that could be a resource just to do some reading and learn about. And when you go back to whatever communities you're going to get, because you're all going to get big jobs like Gordy Bannister, you'll have an opportunity to say, I know there are best practices in places. I've seen them, I've learned about them, I want to share them. And those are simple things just by expanding your educational base.
Before, Jesse, let me make a comment here if I could. I was just going to say, I just wanted to comment on Marcy's comment and what Jack said about, you know, when we were planning for Saturday's football game, we'd reached out to Chief Hedrick of the Rapid City Police Department, and he was excited to come in and participate with us. And it was, not only was there going to be a recognition of bringing people to the field with flags, but a moment of silence for all those soldiers who didn't make it home. And that was brought up. And, you know, it's too bad we don't get a chance to have that activity on Saturday, but I was very pleased with the tributes that the football team was going to come up with and the community members who wanted to participate.
I really want to ask this question, and you know, I thank you for sharing your I guess tangible kind of proactive measures, but you know, really getting back to that question is this freedom of expression has very real effects, has very real consequences. And I think we've all seen that through the comments that we've received and through the things that we've heard leading up to this town hall. And a lot of people, a lot of the greater Hard Rocker community, you know, feeling the same way that Representative Johnson feels of not seeing this as the way to get attention. And that has very serious and repercussions. And so my question to you all is, I mean, what are some of those actions that, you know, those that are involved with the Hard Rocker community, what are some of those actions that could happen? And I guess with your actions, I mean, is that, I guess, worth it to show your freedom of expression?
I would like to answer that a little bit. You know, I'm behind and I back up and I support the students' efforts for bringing attention to issues of racism in my community. But I feel like the students need to deeply consider the perception. Actions have consequences, some intended, but many that are unintended consequences. You have to recognize, I would encourage you to recognize that what the perception of kneeling at the national anthem, at least in my community, for a great number of people, the perception is questions whether your intent is to actually improve on my city and your community's status on the social condition. Is that truly their intent, or is it just to offend? And to get a discussion going by offense. These items or these things that that Mr. Bathel and Jackson have discussed are awesome, great efforts in my community to make my community stronger and more socially receptive. Consider the perception that you're doing when you're kneeling for the Star Spangled Banner, because it isn't perceived the way that you want it to be perceived in a great number of people. And I don't know the numbers, but I do know that there have been threats of withdrawing financial support to the institution. Is that a consequence that you guys are, 10 years from now, students who follow you at the School of Mines, there's less scholarship opportunity because of that? It's happening. That is an unintended consequence of what's going on here. I'm certain that that's not your intent. So if there is a better way, then perhaps it should be explored.
That's a great actually segue. And we only have, I knew this time would fly, we only have about 25 minutes left, which brings us to the last theme of really alternatives. We had a lot of themes that came up with the questions as we solicited questions, and even now in the Q&A that I really want to get to here is, what about alternatives? Are there alternatives? I mean, we've had suggestions that, not playing the national anthem at all to building something that would stand as a symbol. So we've had a number of other suggestions as well. So I guess this might be for everyone, but maybe pointed more at the athletes of, what are your thoughts on alternative forms of expressing your awareness, or expressing yourselves?
I would say, from what we've seen in alternatives, with the protesting and different ways people have tried to, different ways people have tried to do it, we haven't really seen, change. The biggest word that we came up with this year for the football team was be the change. If we're not playing the national anthem, then, in my personal opinion, I love hearing the national anthem. I love hearing what it stands for. But at the same time, people are trying to make a voice for themselves, and we understand that, not everyone's going to agree with us. No matter the decision we make, not everyone's going to agree with what we're doing. We just hope to be able to talk about why we're doing it with people, and hope that they understand, whether at the end of the day you agree or not. We just want people to understand the reasoning behind it. And that's one thing that I've kind of seen a little bit, not with everyone that's disagreed with us, but with a few, they just didn't understand the reasoning of why we were taking that knee. And at the end of the day, there are people that support us and still don't like us taking a knee. That's just how they view it. I can't. So far, we haven't been able to, find any productive in alternative ways.
Well, I hear you, Dom, and I will just say I have not lived your experience, but the ism that I've experienced is sexism. I've never been paid the same at any job I've ever had. I've had to fight for that at risk of my job, at risk of being perceived a troublemaker. And what I've learned is that change comes, but change comes through collaboration. That you have to have people understand your position, agree, and want to help. And I don't think long-term kneeling gets you to that point. It's just my personal opinion. But what I did say to you privately in a email, and I've said on campus, is that there are plenty of us out there that want to help, that have raised our hands to say, what can we do through our time, through our treasure? I'll tell you right now, there's a Christensen Scholarship over at the foundation that funds student activities. There's money there to help in activity. So help us identify how we bring about change to have people see what you see, have people feel what you feel, and start making change, even if it's in small incremental ways.
Okay, so I actually do have something so to first start off, like I talked about the open forums, we're trying to have those every other week. You know, we understand that with COVID-19, there's definitely restrictions to that, but we want to be able to, you know, give everyone and understand everyone's views, opinions, all that. You know, the only way, like I said before, the only way we can grow as people is to step outside that box and have these conversations. So one of the guys actually came up with a little tacky name for it, and he called it JEDS, JEDS. What it stands for is join, encourage, defend, and support. And I'll hit into every single one of those. What we mean by join is basically joining in the fight, you know, to end police brutality, racism, systematic oppression within the Black community and other minority communities as well. You know, we want people to be able to understand what's going on around them that may not physically and mentally affect them, but what others could be going on with as well. We encourage people across the community to have these tough conversations. That's what we want to be able to do. That's like our main priorities, to have these conversations, you know, so we can broaden our mindset and our knowledge of one another and what other people may be going through. You know, we want people to defend the reasoning, you know, help others understand what we are fighting for and not just by what we are doing. You know, a lot of people, you know, from what I've seen, not everyone, like I said before, doesn't understand the reason why we're taking this knee. And, you know, they see it as a way of us trying to disrespect the flag, in which no way we are not trying to, you know. We want people to be able to support and to bring change, you know, within their communities, within their own lives, you know, and in different many aspects. But yeah, that's what I have so far. You know, and we're still working as we go along, you know, we're still looking for more ways in which we can, you know, make change personally, you know, and we're still growing as young individuals as well. But, you know, just having that support and people understanding where we're coming from is one of the best ways to go.
I was
So-
going to, go ahead.
Go ahead, President Rankin.
I was just going to say, you know, I think one alternative, and this may seem a little strange, but there's an educational opportunity here because a lot of the graduates from mines are going to go to multinational corporations. They're going to go to places like Houston and work. They're going to go to a corporation with lots of diversity. But if they're like me, I grew up in a small town in South Dakota. There was no diversity there. We don't know how to speak the language. We don't know what the issues are. So how do we help educate the students that are here at the School of Mines on how to work in a diverse environment? You know, that's one good thing about the football program. We got 93 players, and I'll bet there's a lot of the players, you know, not everybody like Jack grew up in Omaha or you down in Aurora, that haven't had a chance to experience diversity very well. And in coming to campus, this is the first time they've had that experience. How do we help educate them? How do we help them understand how this all works?
Yeah, I think, and I hope you guys can hear me because my screen's frozen. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, go
sir.
ahead.
And I think, so I also sit on the CARA board, which is sort of the Foundation and Alumni Association joint group together. I think there's a way that I think President Rankin and players, if you guys have activities and initiatives that you want to drive in this space, then I would suggest that it ought to be, you know, the role of CARA to help raise money for those activities. And, you know, I would hope that our alumni who state that they are behind the students and they support the students would help us try to drive a more inclusive campus, inclusive dialogue on campus, and engagement on campus, so that we can indeed prepare these young people to be a part of a workplace that I can just tell you fundamentally is changing. I have the opportunity to actually talk with, and I've written for Corporate Board Member magazine, and there's just a lot of people. This has more momentum in the business community, I think, than a lot of people want to acknowledge. And people at the top of corporations are setting up committees. They are not only providing funding, but they're driving activities in the communities with involvement, not just money. And there's been a sea change. It's not just a moment. It will be something bigger and larger than that. And I think the United States of America and the world will be a lot better for it. And so whatever we can do on campus at South Dakota Mines to help prepare these young people to move into that kind of workplace, I think the better.
Thank you, Gordy, for that comment. And we have about 15 minutes, and I promised that we would get to some question and answers. And so I know that we've covered, as I go through these questions, we've covered or touched on some of these topics, and I apologize, we will not get to all of these questions. And some of them have reached the themes that we've talked about already. One of the questions was actually for you, Gordy, is do you believe that African-American lives will be improved by efforts such as kneeling and Black Lives Matter?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Now, that comes with discomfort, but absolutely. And I want to, there's this grand debate about Black Lives Matter. I want to make sure that I sort of draw a distinction. There's a distinction between what I would declare the Black Lives Matter movement and the concept, do Black Lives Matter? And I think people sometimes try to ball that all up together. I will just tell you, I don't know that much about the Black Lives Matter movement. I've been in a few venues where I've had a chance to see and talk to some people who are part of the movement, but I don't really have a deep understanding of the movement. But what I do believe is that Black Lives Matter, right? And so I think that the conversation that I'm witnessing is going to drive change. And my analogy that maybe is a little bit simpler is sort of like about fossil fuels. So I'm in the energy industry. There's a statements that people make about being fossil free. Well, fossil free is a movement, but that's different than suggesting that we want to have carbon neutrality and things of that nature. And I would like to ask people to try to separate those things and not get all balled up in that. And so the fact that we're having more conversations, the fact that people actually are taking action, and I do believe now this time is different than what happened in the civil rights movement and other sorts of circumstances, I think we're going to have change.
Thank you, Gordy. And we're just moving right along here. Just trying to get as many questions answered as possible. So this actually goes out to the student athletes of, you could have done all that you were talking about without, in this person's opinion, desecrating the flag. So, and this person believes that you would have gotten a lot of good press, and alumni would have probably really been followed you or really helped and supported for that all the way. So why not do all those other things that you want to do first? And then what, I guess the question is, why would you kneel if you could have done all that stuff anyway?
There are a lot of things that our football team and the program have done for community outreach. I don't know how many of you are aware of SD Chips, but it's an child identification program that we've helped with the, just kind of getting fingerprints, photo ideas of children. So if they're ever lost or happen to be taken or whatever the case might be, that there's a way of, getting picture out and getting information to police and first responders to be able to try to find them, as well as we've done food drives and all these things. That part of it wasn't the intent of where we're going, I guess. We've already done all these things, but we'd like to bring, now that we have the attention, we'd like to bring that to the community and say, hey, these are the things that we've done. There's other things that we'd like to do, and we're asking for your help in doing them. And that's not all monetary. It's not about getting money to do these things. It's about looking inside and seeing what we can do for our fellow man, fellow woman, and being able to uplift as many as we can and become united. Personally, I can't speak of the kneeling aspect, but I believe it wasn't for getting a monetary or a personal accolades of any kind of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, when we had this conversation, at the beginning of the season, we were still working on ways in which we could take that next step, And when we were kneeling, like we said, we were kneeling for the injustices, for, fallen comrades, fallen people, that we could have been in their position, especially as a Black person, as a Black male, And it's not something that we plan on continuing to do, you know, and we wanted to be able to, I don't know how to best explain it. We wanted to be able to, like, you know, show our views in the best way possible so that people could understand. And, you know, as we first started doing it, people didn't really understand, you know, the reasoning behind it. You know, we weren't able to get out a statement or anything to the people or on the board and whatnot. But it's just been kind of like a process for us. You know, it was the best way for us to get people's attention so that we can express our views and what we're standing for, what we're kneeling for, I should say.
So another theme that has emerged in the questions that we're seeing is you have your personal speech, and then you have speech while wearing a Hard Rocker uniform. And should those be kept separate? And this could be for anybody. This could be for anyone.
I think we would all be naive if we turned a blind eye to the fact that this has become kind of a national movement. And the fact that these student athletes wanted to participate, especially after several months of some horrific violence in this country in a peaceful way, is a part of what's a national movement. And I think for the university to say we support that was a teaching moment. Again, I don't like people kneeling at the flag, and I totally hear what Representative Johnson is saying, but I found very powerful the gesture of 10 students kneeling and 70 other young men lined up behind them with their hands on their shoulders. And I thought that picture said something very powerful about the United States of America, differences of opinion, the right to express them, and coming together as an imperfect union, striving to be more perfect.
Hey, Jesse, could you re-say that question for me, please?
Sure, and it wasn't a question in and of itself, because there's several questions that have the theme of you have your freedom of expression, but then you're also wearing a Hard Rocker uniform, meaning that you're also representing a lot of people, other students, faculty, staff, alumni, people associated with the school, with the institution. So should those things, can they be separate? I mean, is there another way, or are you able, does it have to be under that circumstance?
I think for me personally, I think it's all right, depending on the person or the people's intent. You know, at the end of the day, you know, if we're fighting for a just cause, I feel like, you know, whether we're wearing the uniform, you know, because at the end of the day, you know, I can wear Hard Rocker gear. You know, I'm the same person when I'm wearing the Hard Rocker gear and when I'm not. You know, I'm the same person when I go back home to Colorado, and then when I'm here on campus here at the school. I think, you know, it really depends on what the intent behind each of the student athletes is. But I think it should be acceptable as long as they have pure and good-hearted intent.
Mr. Herrera,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to mention something. First of all, I applaud and respect this JEDS movement. Mr. Jackson, you mentioned JEDS. Is it J-E-D, like Delta S?
J-E-D-S, yes, sir.
Join, educate, what are the others?
Join, encourage, defend, and support.
Okay. Well, I think that's a grand effort. I applaud that. That's what we look for out of students from School of Mines and Technology. You mentioned the word intent again, just 1 moment ago. You mentioned intent. And you also mentioned earlier that it is not your intent to disrespect the national anthem, and it's not your intent to disrespect the flag. But Mr. Jackson, I would implore you to understand that it is disrespect, and it's perceived that way, and it is. Now, you've mentioned that you may not choose to do this again as a team. I don't think the people that are listening to this or that have had problems with this will hold a grudge. I think that what's going to happen is that if you continue with efforts like JEDS, with efforts like creating a platform for people to express their discontent with the way our society is working, you're going to have a lot of support of all kinds. But if this perception continues where the people that you're trying to reach out to are offended, it's counterproductive. And intent or no intent, it's expressing, it is a disrespect to the flag when you kneel. It's a disrespect, it's a sign of disrespect. And there isn't anything anybody can do about that. So work with this, I would say. I want to work with you. I want to see your efforts fulfilled. I want to see your efforts rewarded. And I want to join you in that. But certainly it isn't helping your cause to express your opinion the way that it has been, at least not in this region. So
Dom, before you answer, thank you, Representative Johnson. We are reaching the end of our time, and I did promise each of you the chance for a closing remark too. So Dom, if you want to answer the question and have your closing remark here, yeah, please feel free to go ahead and tie that up. Or if you'd like me to come back, I can do that since you were just answering too.
I'll just answer the question, his comments that he had. So, some of the guys, we had this conversation about when we'll stop taking the knee and everything. And, we just want to see, that change. We want to, just like we talked about, JEDS, ways that people can support and everything. And I want to also talk about, what I meant by intent was like the reasoning and the cause. And we understand that certain people are going to see that as disrespect to the flag, and we also see that, we've talked to other veterans, and other people who see that as a way to get the change. We understand this, but we can't get both sides to completely agree with what we're doing. Like my father is in support, and so are the other fathers that have served in the military of the student athletes, in support of what we're doing. And at the same time, we understand, and I understand how you feel about us taking a knee. At the end of the day, we're not going to be able to fully have everyone agree with what we're doing. And that's something we understand. What we just want to do, moving forward is, like I said, have these conversations. Like I said before, we don't plan on having a knee in the upcoming futures. We're just trying to start change as of right now, be that beginning point to create unity within, this community, and then within this state, and then within this country.
Thank you, Dom. And with that, we will actually move over to Jack. So we'll hear your final remarks, and then we'll just kind of move backwards there.
I just want to say thank you for everyone that joined this town hall and this discussion, especially those of you who are on the panel, taking time out of your day to come share your viewpoints and just kind of incorporate your background into what we're talking about here. Personally, out of the stance that I had when this first started happening in 2016, I thought kneeling for the national anthem was not a smart choice. It was disrespecting the flag. After getting behind these men on our team and these brothers that I have on my team and seeing what the reason is for, and that they're not truly trying to disrespect the flag, that they're trying to bring awareness to something, and understanding where they come from, I think that might help try to bridge the gap between people who were like me or may still be like me into where we're trying to reach with more of a unity standpoint. Like I said, I would like to say thank you for everyone who's taken time out of their day to be here. And I appreciate you listening to my perspective and the perspective of the others on the panel as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Dom. Really appreciate it. Marcy?
I would just like to say thank you to everybody on the panel, particularly these two young student athletes who have put themselves out there in a discussion that is important and not always a comfortable one. To people who are listening, I would just like to say that this is a country that was founded on finding consensus. It's why it's not easy to have a bill become law in the United States of America, and the founders intended it that way. There are strong opinions all around, but I hope the one thing we can agree on is that these are young men of goodwill and good conscience with good intent. And even if we make assumptions based on our space about how we feel about that issue, if we can start with their intent is good and ask how can we help, perhaps we can bring about a better change. What I hope does not happen is what I've seen in social media and other places where alumni of the university are saying, I will not support, I will not give. In fact, I will work counterproductively, because that does nothing more than drive the wedge further. So just as I've challenged these young men to think about building a span as engineers or problem solvers and builders, building that span to change, I hope the alumni on the other end will also support that change and support this university that's trying to help bring it about.
Thank you for your comments, Marcy. I appreciate it. Colonel Hall, you're next.
Yes, I agree with a lot of what Marcy said. Is that change is hard, change is uncomfortable, change needs to be made, and the only way you get change is by going through periods of uncomfort. I agree that people threatening to withhold funding, threatening to get their friends to withhold funding or get other people to is counterproductive. But I work on the board of a small nonprofit, and my experience generally has been that the people that make the most noise donate the least. I'd say anybody that wants to donate, go to hardrockclub.org/give if you want to donate. I made a donation while we were talking today. Speak with your checkbooks. I'm sure that the student athletes would appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody for participating. Mr. Johnson, I know we don't agree on a lot of stuff, but I'm sure you agree that this has been a good dialogue.
Thank you, Colonel Hall. Representative Johnson.
I thank you, but I think I've already had my final saying. So thank you to everybody. Mr. Jackson and Jack, go out and catch the ball. Do a good job. Represent your community. Do the right thing. Really think about the consequences of your actions. And I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Gordy.
Yeah, I think so it's been 40 years since I graduated from Mines. And I'm glad we're having this conversation today. I just wish we could have had it many, many years ago. It's way too late coming. But having said that, I certainly want to applaud these student athletes for taking the step that actually has triggered us having this conversation in a meaningful way. I don't believe we would have ever had it had they not done what they did. Change only happens when something really triggers it to occur, and people sort of find it that a friction occurs. For the physicists in the room, you get past that inertia. I don't think we would have had this conversation had they not taken the steps that they took. So I want to applaud you for doing that. I want to thank everybody who was on this call and on this panel who chose to express their views publicly about kind of where they are on this. I think that's really important. And I think it's important that we continue to have conversation and dialogue as we go forward. I would like to express to the student athletes, I stand in full support of you. I don't want you to be intimidated by threats of anything. I believe there are resources available to South Dakota Mines that can help drive this regardless of the decisions that you make. And they should be, quite frankly. And so, just don't be intimidated by people who disagree with your point of view. when it's all said and done. I think what I want to encourage you to do is do what you feel like is right. School of Mines helped teach me how to exercise judgment. And I believe in you, and I believe in the judgment that you will take on this. And I'll find a way to support it regardless of what that comes out to be. So I just want to encourage you in that regard. And thanks for having me on the panel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gordy. Thank you for your thoughts. President Rankin.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I think we heard tonight that there are several things we agree with and some things we don't agree with. I think we are all for freedom of expression and freedom of speech. And sometimes we hear things we don't want to hear, but that doesn't mean that we don't support that freedom of speech. We just have to figure out how to work through it and have these conversations. You know, the other thing that is I've talked to students, not the students that are here, but students on campus, is we still have racism in campus and in the local community. And, you know, it's really up to all of us to speak out on this, because as my daughter says, if you are not talking about it or speaking out, then you're condoning it. And we've got to make South Dakota and Rapid City and the nation a better place. So thank you all for joining. I really appreciate you being here.
Okay. Thank you all for your all your thoughts, your words. It was a privilege for me to be your facilitator tonight. I really appreciate you all being respectful of each other. And yes, we get animated, we get enthusiastic because we care about this stuff. It's important to all of us. As I mentioned at the beginning, the goal was not for us to agree, but hopefully whoever, people on the panel or people that are listening, that we all could have a deeper understanding, or at least a little bit more of an understanding of why we were doing this panel here. So I sincerely appreciate everybody's thoughts and words tonight. So this concludes our discussion for tonight. I would like to thank all the panel members again for your time and your perspectives. You're all busy people. And thank you, South Dakota Mines, for encouraging dialogue. And I look forward to future sessions. All right. Good night, everyone.